Hush now, my eternal love, the stars watch over thee.
The executive suite was emptier than usual for a Christmas Eve afternoon, most of Stewart Industries already released for the holiday. I stood outside Finn Stewart's office, reviewing the last quarterly projections before the break. 2 years. 2 years I'd worked as his personal assistant, and I still couldn't reconcile the man with the myth. He was exacting, brilliant, and maintained a coldness that felt less like professionalism and more like armor against the world itself. I'd learned to read the micro-expressions others missed, the way his jaw tightened when someone mentioned December 25th, how his fingers would trace the platinum ring on his right hand when he thought no one was watching, the particular shade his pale eyes became when the holiday decorations started appearing in the building lobby. I'd also learned somewhere along the way that working for Finn Stewart meant working for a man haunted by something he'd never name. The wrapped music box sat heavy in my bag. I shouldn't give it to him. I knew he'd reject it, knew he forbade any acknowledgement of Christmas in his presence. But I'd spent 3 months commissioning this gift, and something deeper than logic told me he needed it. Tonight I would find out if I was right or if I'd finally pushed too far. The intercom on my desk buzzed precisely at 5:47 p.m. "Ms. Brennan, you're still here." Finn's voice carried that particular flatness he used when displeased. "Finishing the Henderson contract review, Mr. Stewart. I'll be gone within the hour." Silence. Then, "Leave it. Go home. It's Christmas Eve." I stared at the intercom, thrown by the almost gentle dismissal. In 2 years, Finn Stewart had never once acknowledged a holiday, let alone encouraged me to observe one. I grabbed my bag, the music box shifting inside, and made a decision that would change everything. His office door was already open when I approached. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Washington, D.C., hands clasped behind his back, silhouetted against the city lights beginning to twinkle in the winter dusk. From behind, he could have been any successful executive in his early 30s, impeccably tailored charcoal suit, dark hair swept back, posture rigid with control. But I'd seen what others missed. The way he never appeared in the office before sunset. The unusually pale skin that never tanned despite business trips to sunny locations. The way his eyes sometimes caught the light wrong, reflecting silver instead of blue. "Mr. Stewart?" He didn't turn. I said, "Go home, Sally. I have something for you first." Now he turned, and the expression on his face made my breath catch. Not anger, something rawer, more vulnerable. Exhaustion maybe, or the particular weariness of someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight for far too long. "I don't accept gifts." His voice was ice. "I know. But this one." I pulled the wrapped box from my bag, silver paper catching the lamplight. "This one isn't really from me. It's something you lost. I'm just returning it." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I saw something ancient flicker behind them. Something that didn't belong in a 30-something CEO's face. "You presume too much, Ms. Brennan." "Probably." I set the box on his desk, my hands steadier than I felt. "Not everything about December 25th has to hurt forever, Mr. Stewart. Sometimes we need permission to remember the good parts too." I left before he could respond, before my courage failed, before I could see whether I'd made a terrible mistake. Behind me I heard nothing. No movement, no acknowledgement. I was at the elevator when I heard it, so faint I might have imagined it. The delicate, tinkling notes of a music box playing a melody I'd never heard anywhere except in the unconscious humming of a man who thought no one noticed. The elevator doors closed on the sound, and I wondered if I'd just saved Finn Stewart or destroyed him. Either way, there was no taking it back now. Several hours later. The penthouse was dark when Finn finally allowed himself to approach the gift. 712 years and he still couldn't quite kill hope. It always resurged at the worst moments, whispering impossible things. He unwrapped the paper with movements made careful by time. 6 centuries of learning that rushing led to breakage, that patience was the only virtue immortality truly taught. The music box was exquisite. Handcrafted walnut, inlaid with mother-of-pearl in patterns that mimicked medieval scrollwork. The kind of craftsmanship that took months, cost money Sally Brennan didn't have, required the kind of obsessive attention to detail that spoke of care. His hands, which had been steady through wars and plagues and the slow death of everyone he'd ever loved, trembled as he lifted the lid. The lullaby began. Doors, mon petit ange, doors. The French was perfect. Not modern French, but the regional dialect of rural France in the 1400s. The exact words, the exact melody, the exact tempo he'd used to sing his daughter to sleep 599 years ago. The sound shattered him. Finn's knees hit the marble floor, the music box clutched to his chest as 6 centuries of suppressed grief came crashing through every wall he'd built. The melody continued, delicate and merciless, dragging him back through time. Isla, age 4, dark curls tangled from play, begging, "One more time, Papa, please?" Her small hand in his as they walked to the village market. The way she'd press flowers between the pages of his manuscripts, leaving blooms scattered through his work like prayers. Teaching her to dance at the harvest festival, her feet on his feet, laughing as he spun her in circles. The lullaby he'd sung every night without fail, the only thing that could calm her nightmares of storms and wolves and the dark things she somehow knew existed beyond firelight. The night he'd returned from feeding to find their cottage silent. The blood. Her body, his wife's body, arranged like discarded dolls. The lullaby dying on his lips as he understood he'd failed to protect them. How? The word tore from him raw and ragged. How did she know? He looked at the music box through tears. Vampires could cry, though he hadn't in 600 years, and saw the tiny brass plate on the bottom. For the Father who sang in the darkness. May you find permission to sing in the light again. S.B. Sally had commissioned this. Sally, who'd watched him for 2 years with those perceptive brown eyes. Sally, who noticed when he hummed unconsciously while reviewing contracts. Sally, who'd somehow tracked down a melody that shouldn't exist in any modern record, who'd found a craftsman capable of recreating it with period accuracy, who'd spent money she couldn't afford to give him back something he'd thought lost forever. Sally, who reminded him so much of Isla it physically hurt some days. The realization broke through his shock. She'd been paying attention. Not just doing her job, but seeing him, really seeing him, past the coldness and the carefully maintained distance and the walls built from 600 years of choosing numbness over feeling. She'd seen him, and instead of running she'd tried to heal him. The music box played on, and Finn Stewart, who'd survived the Black Death and the fall of empires, who'd built fortunes and walked away from them, who'd taught himself not to hope because hope always led to loss, allowed himself to break completely. Somewhere in the wreckage of his composure, a question formed. How did Sally Brennan know a 15th century lullaby? And more terrifying, what else had she figured out about the monster who signed her paychecks? He had to know. Tomorrow, no, tonight. Christmas Day. The cursed anniversary itself. For the first time in 600 years, Finn Stewart would spend December 25th with another person. He would demand answers. He would confront the woman who'd somehow reached across centuries to return his daughter's lullaby. And maybe, if he was brave enough, he would finally speak Isla's name aloud to someone who might understand that some grief never fades, it just learns to echo differently. Sometimes the things we lose don't really leave us, they transform into something we carry forward, shaping every choice we make. Finn's story is about a man who spent 600 years learning the wrong lessons from grief, building walls so high they've become his prison. If you've ever felt stuck in your own pain, unable to move forward while unable to forget, his journey might resonate with your heart. So stay with me even as we explore how even the oldest wounds can begin to heal when someone refuses to let us suffer alone. Keep watching to discover what happens when Finn finally confronts the memories he's been running from. You might find echoes of your own story in his. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of silence that only comes when the entire city sleeps late, recovering from midnight services and family gatherings Finn had never attended. He stood at the same window where he'd spent the night, the music box open on the table behind him, still playing its gentle loop. Vampires didn't need sleep, but he usually allowed himself the pretense of rest. Not tonight. Tonight he'd stood vigil with ghosts and a melody that shouldn't exist. At 7:34 a.m. he picked up his phone and dialed. Sally answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the hour. "Mr. Stewart? Come to my penthouse. Now." The words came out harsher than intended, 6 centuries of control fraying at the edges. A pause. "The address?" He gave it, then added, "This isn't optional, Ms. Brennan." "I know," she said quietly. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. She arrived in 37. Finn watched from his window as she exited the car service, dressed in jeans and a cream sweater that made her look younger than her 26 years. She moved with purpose toward his building, head up, shoulders back, nervous but not afraid. That observation settled something in his chest. She'd known he would call. Known and come anyway. When she stepped off his private elevator into the penthouse, her eyes went immediately to the music box, still open, still playing. "How did you find it?" Finn didn't bother with greetings. "How did you know that song?" Sally set her bag down carefully, meeting his gaze with a steadiness that reminded him achingly of Isla facing down village boys twice her size. "I've been watching you for 2 years, Mr. Stewart. Not as your assistant. As someone trying to understand why a man who has everything looks like he's carrying the weight of centuries. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I?" She moved closer and he caught the scent of vanilla and something earthier, bookstores maybe, or old paper. "You hum while you work. Always the same melody." At first I thought it was unconscious, but then I realized it only happens when you're reviewing reports in December. Like you're trying to drown out something you don't want to hear. Finn's hands clenched. "You recorded me?" "On my phone, yes. Just the melody." No apology in her voice, only matter-of-fact acknowledgement. "I took it to a musicologist at Georgetown. Professor Yates." She identified it as a 15th-century French lullaby specific to rural Burgundy. Virtually unknown. Only referenced in one manuscript about daily village life. The specificity of it stole his breath. "That's impossible." "I thought so too. But Professor Yates was certain. She helped me find a craftsman in Baltimore who specializes in period musical instruments. It took 3 months and most of my savings to commission the music box." Sally's voice softened. "You looked so sad every December, Mr. Stewart. Like you were watching something beautiful die over and over. I wanted to give you back whatever made that melody matter, before it became painful." The anger he'd been nursing all night dissolved into something more dangerous. Recognition. She'd seen him. Not the CEO, not the untouchable executive, but the broken father hiding behind 700 years of practice distance. "You had no right to dig into my past," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "I didn't dig into anything. I paid attention. There's a difference." Sally took another step forward. "Why does this song hurt you so much?" "That's none of your concern." "Then why am I here on Christmas morning? Why call me at all if it doesn't matter?" Finn turned away, unable to face the openness in her expression. "Why do you care, Sally? About any of this, about me? I'm not kind to you. I'm not warm or encouraging or any of the things a good boss should be." "No," she agreed quietly. "But you're alone. And I understand that particular kind of loneliness, the kind where you convince yourself isolation is safety." Her voice cracked slightly. "I was orphaned at 8. My grandmother raised me until she died 3 years ago. Since then I've been untethered. Going through motions. Working for you was the first thing that felt like purpose, even if that purpose was just making sure you remembered to eat lunch." He turned back to her, seeing the truth written in every line of her body. She wasn't just his assistant. She'd been orbiting his loneliness, recognizing something of herself in his careful distance. "I see the same thing in you that I fight in myself," Sally continued. The belief that if we don't let anyone close, we can't lose them. But we're already lost, Mr. Stewart. We've been lost since we decided loneliness was safer than love. The observation cut too deep. Finn found himself asking, "Why do you call me Mr. Stewart? Here, alone, after everything, why the formality?" Her smile was sad. "Because if I call you Finn, I have to admit you're not just my boss. And I don't know what we are if you're not." The honesty broke something in him. "You remind me of my daughter." The words escaped before he could stop them. "Every single day. The way you stand when you're determined, the questions you ask when everyone else accepts easy answers. And I've been cruel to keep you at distance because I couldn't bear to love someone else who might." He stopped, the confession too raw. Sally's expression gentled. "Who might what?" "Die. Everyone dies eventually, Finn. Even you'll die someday, won't you?" His laugh was hollow, ancient. "No. I won't. That's the curse." Understanding dawned slowly in her eyes, not complete comprehension but the beginning of it. "How old are you?" 712 years old, he said simply. "And my daughter's name was Isla. She died on Christmas Day in 1424. I haven't spoken her name aloud since." Sally didn't flinch, didn't retreat. She just asked, voice gentle as falling snow, "What was she like?" Not how she died. Who was she when she lived? And Finn Stewart, who'd spent 6 centuries running from December 25th, found himself finally ready to answer. They moved to the living room without discussion, Sally curling into the corner of his leather sofa, while Finn remained standing, too restless for stillness. The music box played on in the background, and he found himself speaking words he'd locked away for 6 centuries. "Isla was stubborn," he began, the name feeling foreign and precious on his tongue. "Impossibly stubborn. I was a scribe in our village, copying manuscripts, keeping records. She'd insist on helping even when she was barely tall enough to reach the desk. Her letters were terrible at first, all crooked lines and smudged ink, but she refused to give up." Sally smiled. "Sounds familiar." "She collected flowers. Pressed them between the pages of my work when I wasn't looking. I'd open a ledger weeks later and find dried violets, wild roses. Once, an entire sprig of lavender that made the monastery accounts smell like summer for months." The memory loosened something in his chest. She asked questions about everything. Why stars moved, why birds flew south, why people hurt each other when kindness cost nothing. Did you have answers? Never good enough ones. But she'd accept them and ask 3 more questions. Finn finally sat, the distance between them feeling less necessary now. "I taught her to dance at a harvest festival. She stood on my feet, laughing while I spun her in circles. She believed I could fix anything. Broken tools, scraped knees, her nightmares about wolves and darkness. The lullaby," Sally said softly. "The only thing that worked when she woke screaming. I'd sing until dawn sometimes, just holding her." His voice cracked. "She made me promise I'd always find joy, even in dark times. I've been breaking that promise for 600 years. Sally's eyes were wet, but she didn't look away. "My grandmother used to say grief is love with nowhere to go. That we carry the people we lose in the stories we tell about them." "Tell me about her." So Sally did. Stories of a fierce woman who'd raised her after her parents died, who taught her to bake bread and question authority and never apologize for taking up space in the world. The parallels emerged like shadows: protective love, impossible loss, the particular loneliness of being the last one left. "I've been looking for something," Sally admitted. "Someone who understood that specific kind of empty. I think I've been looking for a father figure. And you've been avoiding becoming one." The observation hung between them, true and terrifying. At midday, with winter light streaming through the windows, Sally asked, "You said you won't die. What did you mean?" Finn stood abruptly, moved to the window. Decision point. He could lie, deflect, maintain the careful fiction he'd built. Or he could trust this woman who'd returned his daughter's lullaby and asked what Isla was like when she lived. He chose truth. Watch carefully, he said, and moved. One moment he stood by the window. The next he was across the room, moving faster than human eyes should track. He lifted the grand piano with one hand, held it aloft like it weighed nothing. Set it down without sound. Sally's gasp was audible, but when he turned to face her, searching for fear, he found only wonder. "You're a vampire," she breathed. "That's why you never come in before sunset. Why you look 35 but reference centuries. Why you're so careful about distance." 712 years old, he confirmed. Turned the night my parents were murdered. Christmas Day, 1312. He told her everything then. Raiders destroying his village, being beaten and left for dead, Lauren finding him in the snow and offering impossible choice, death or transformation. A century learning to be predator before remembering how to be a person. Finding love with a human woman named Catherine. Isla, born in 1402. 22 perfect years before history repeated itself with cruel precision. 600 December 25 THS since, he finished. Each one survived alone. Sally was quiet for a long moment, processing. You've been alone for 600 years because you think everyone you love dies on Christmas. It's not a thought. It's a pattern. The date is cursed. Or, Sally said gently, you've made it a curse by refusing to live on it. The challenge stung precisely because it was true. Finn had spent 6 centuries treating December 25th as enemy rather than neutral time, had let 2 tragedies define an immortal lifetime. "Aren't you afraid?" he asked. "Of what I am, what I could do?" Sally rose, crossed to where he stood, and did something no one had dared in decades. She took his hand. Her warmth was shocking against his perpetual cold. "Of you?" "No." "For you?" Terrified. "You've been carrying this alone for so long, Finn. 600 years of Christmas days spent running from ghosts." Her grip tightened. "You're still you. Still the man who remembers his daughter's favorite flowers, who made sure I took lunch breaks, who's been protecting me in small ways for 2 years without admitting why." "You remind me of her," he admitted. "It terrifies me." "I know. But I'm here anyway. And I'm not going anywhere." They spent the rest of Christmas Day together, 2 profoundly lonely people choosing connection over safety. Sally ordered takeout that Finn couldn't eat but watched her enjoy. They talked about everything and nothing, her life, his centuries, the strange gift of this day that had always meant death becoming something else entirely. As evening approached, Sally stood at the windows, watching the city lights emerge. "Stay up with me until sunrise," she said. "We'll watch it together." Finn's hesitation was visceral. "I haven't watched a sunrise in. I can't remember when." "Then it's time." Sally turned, and in the failing light she looked so much like Isla it stole his breath. "Your daughter would want you to see the light again, Finn. To stop hiding in darkness you chose." He looked at this woman who'd commissioned a music box to heal him, who'd accepted his monstrous nature without flinching, who was offering him a chance to reclaim the day he'd spent 6 centuries fleeing. "Yes," he said simply. "Let's watch the sunrise." They were watching the stars from his balcony, wrapped in the comfortable silence of people learning to trust each other, when Finn's phone vibrated. The message was simple, devastating. "Your new pet is adorable. Would be a shame if she disappeared like the last one. Vincent." A vampire from Finn's early centuries, still nursing grudges older than most nations. Finn's hand crushed the phone's edge, splintering glass. "What is it?" Sally asked, reading his face too well. "Nothing. You need to leave. Now." His voice was ice, the warmth of the past hours evaporating. "Finn." "I said leave." He moved away from her, putting the width of the balcony between them. This was a mistake. All of it. You need to go home, resign tomorrow, and forget you ever knew me. Sally stood, and instead of retreating, she stepped closer. Someone threatened me. That's what the message said, isn't it? That's why you're doing this. Her perceptiveness shouldn't have surprised him. Nothing about Sally was predictable. You don't understand, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Everyone I love dies. My parents on this date. My daughter on this date. It's a pattern, Sally. The curse is real and I can't add you to that list. You don't get to decide I'm safer without you. Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. I'm not your daughter, Finn. I'm not Isla. I'm Sally, and I get to choose my own risks. You don't get to choose loneliness for both of us because you're afraid. You don't know what I'm capable of. The words tore from him. What I've done to protect people before and failed. What I might become trying to keep you safe. Then show me. Sally closed the distance between them, fearless. Stop hiding behind 600 years of grief and show me the monster you're so afraid of becoming. 7 centuries of control shattered. I can't lose you. Finn's voice broke completely. I've only just found you. You're the first person in 600 years who's made me remember what it felt like to be a father, to care if someone ate lunch, to worry if they're warm enough to want to hear about their day. I can't survive losing that again. Sally's expression softened with understanding. You already love me. Not as a replacement for Isla. As me. Yes, he admitted, the word barely a whisper. And it terrifies me because I know how this ends. Everyone I love on this cursed day. The balcony door exploded inward. Vincent moved like shadow made flesh, ancient and cruel, his smile revealing fangs that had ended countless lives. Finn, old friend. I see you've found another human to mourn. Finn moved before thought, placing himself between Vincent and Sally with speed that blurred reality. Leave. Now. This isn't your concern. But it is. You cost me territory in Philadelphia in 1847. I've waited patiently for the perfect revenge, hurting you the way you hurt me. By taking what you love on the anniversary you fear most. The violence that followed was brief and absolute. Finn fought with 6 centuries of accumulated skill, every instinct honed to protect what mattered. Vincent was strong, but Finn was desperate. Within moments he had the rival vampire pinned, throat in his grip, ready to end this permanently. Do it, Vincent hissed. Prove you're the monster you've always been. Finn looked back at Sally, expecting horror. Instead, she stood calm, phone in hand. She called someone, police or help, preparing to act even as she watched him unleash hell. Her faith in him was staggering. He didn't kill Vincent. Instead, he called Laurent, his maker, his only remaining connection to the vampire world. Within minutes, ancient authority arrived to remove the threat permanently, dragging Vincent into consequences that didn't require Finn's hands to be drenched in more blood. When it was over, Finn stood on his balcony covered in Vincent's blood, shaking with adrenaline and terror and shame. Sally approached slowly and he flinched. Is this what you've been hiding? She asked quietly. The violence you're capable of? Yes. I'm a monster, Sally. I've always been a monster. She reached up, impossibly brave, and touched his face. You're a father who protects his family. That's not monstrous. That's love. The words broke him. Finn collapsed to his knees and Sally went with him, holding him while 600 years of grief finally found release. He wept. Vampires could cry, though he hadn't since Isla died. Great racking sobs that shook his entire frame. I miss her so much, he gasped. I miss being her father. I miss mattering to someone enough to be worth protecting. You can still be a father, Sally whispered, her own tears falling into his hair. I'm here. I'm choosing you, Finn. Please choose me back. He looked up at this woman who'd returned his daughter's lullaby, who'd accepted his monstrous nature, who'd stood unflinching while he'd unleashed violence to keep her safe. She was offering him everything he'd denied himself for 6 centuries: family, purpose, the courage to love despite the cost. "I choose you," Finn said, his voice raw but certain. "I choose this. I choose to stop running from December 25th. I choose to believe that loving you, as my daughter, my family, honors Isla instead of betraying her." Sally smiled through her tears. "Then the curse is broken. Not because the date changed, but because you finally changed your relationship to it." They stayed on the balcony until dawn approached, making promises and plans. He would teach her about the vampire world, introduce her to Laurent, show her the centuries he'd survived. She would teach him how to live again in the present, how to celebrate holidays instead of enduring them, how to be a father without the terror of inevitable loss. As the first light touched the horizon, Sally took his hand. "Ready to see the sunrise?" Finn Stewart, who'd spent 600 years hiding from the light, smiled. "Yes. Let's watch it together." Dawn approached with the slow inevitability of hope, painting Washington, D.C. in shades of gold and rose. Finn and Sally stood on his balcony, the December cold touching only one of them, waiting for the sun he'd avoided for centuries. "What would she think of me?" Sally asked quietly. "Isla, I mean." Finn considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "She would have loved you. You have her courage, her refusal to accept easy answers. She questioned everything too, drove me mad sometimes with her endless, 'Why, Papa?' But I'd give anything to hear it again." "I'm not trying to replace her," Sally said, a tremor in her voice. "You couldn't. And you don't have to." Finn took her hand, marveling at the warmth of living flesh. "Loving you doesn't diminish loving her. I'm learning that my heart is bigger than I thought. There's room for both. Room for the daughter I lost and the daughter I found." The sun broke the horizon, and Finn didn't look away. Light touched his face for the first time in so long he'd forgotten how it felt. Warm, gentle, alive. Not burning as he'd feared, just illuminating. Tears tracked down his cheeks, but this time they carried no shame. "I've been living in darkness by choice," he whispered. "The sun was always there. I just refused to see it." Sally leaned against his shoulder. "Sometimes we need someone to remind us to open our eyes." They watched until the sun fully rose, marking December 26th, the first day of the rest of his immortal life. 1 year later, everything had changed. Finn stood in his penthouse on Christmas Eve, watching Sally fuss with the small tree they'd chosen together. White lights twinkled throughout the space, and the music box sat on the mantel, Isla's lullaby playing softly. For the first time in 600 years, his home felt lived in. Loved in. Sally had integrated seamlessly into his world. He'd introduced her to Laurent, who'd taken one look at her and smiled knowingly. "She has your daughter's spirit," his maker had said. Isla would approve. Through Sally, Finn had reconnected with the immortal community he'd abandoned, finding that chosen family could exist across centuries. Tonight, Sally was bringing someone to meet him. A young architect named Christopher who made her laugh in ways that reminded Finn achingly of Catherine's joy. He'd vetted the man thoroughly, naturally, using resources that made Sally roll her eyes. But beneath his protectiveness was genuine happiness. His daughter deserved love. The elevator chimed. Sally emerged, Christopher's hand in hers, nervous energy radiating from both of them. "Dad," Sally said. She'd started calling him that 6 months ago, and it still made his heart clench. "This is Christopher." The young man extended his hand, trying not to look intimidated. "Mr. Stewart, it's an honor." Finn shook his hand, careful of his strength, reading Christopher's character in the steadiness of his grip and the way he looked at Sally. "Call me Finn. Anyone important to my daughter is important to me." They talked for hours, about architecture, about Sally's work, about the life Christopher wanted to build. Finn watched his daughter glow, saw the way she touched Christopher's arm when she laughed, and felt nothing but gratitude that she'd found this. As the evening wound down, Sally approached the music box, trailing her fingers across its surface. "Do you think Isla would approve of us? Of me being part of your life?" Finn rose, joining her at the mantel. "Isla taught me something I'd forgotten by the time she died. That love is never wasted, even when it ends in loss. The loving is the point, not the keeping." He touched the music box gently. "She would be proud that I finally learned the lesson. She would love that I found my way back to being a father." He turned to Sally, seeing both her and Isla in that moment, not confused but complementary, past and present woven together. "And she would adore you, Sally. Because you did what she always asked me to do. You found the joy even in the dark times. You reminded me how." Sally pulled a wrapped frame from her bag, hands trembling slightly. "I have something for you." Finn unwrapped it carefully, revealing a pressed wildflower, deep purple, delicate as memory, mounted behind glass with a small brass plate reading, "First bloom, rooftop garden, spring 2025. "Lauren told me Isla used to collect flowers," Sally explained. "I pressed this one last spring, the first flower that bloomed in your rooftop garden. I thought maybe you could start a new collection. Not to replace hers, but to add to the story." The tears came freely now, as they had so many times this year. Healing tears, not grief. She would love this. "Thank you, Sally. For this, for everything. For giving me permission to live again. There are losses that reshape us so completely, we forget who we were before the breaking." Finn spent 600 years believing that survival meant staying broken, that protecting his heart meant never opening it again. But Sally taught him what we all need to remember: that grief is love with nowhere to go, and the only way to honor what we've lost is to keep loving anyway. If Finn's journey moved something in you, if you saw yourself in his struggle to choose hope over fear, you're not alone in that battle. Stories like these matter because they remind us that healing isn't betrayal and tomorrow isn't promised, but it's still worth showing up for. Thank you for watching Finn and Sally's story. May you find the courage to let yourself be loved, even when you're afraid. Later, after Christopher left, Finn and Sally stood on the balcony watching another sunrise together, their tradition now, marking December 26th as the day the curse broke. The city below was waking to Christmas morning, families and joy and the ordinary magic of being alive. "What are you thinking about?" Sally asked. Finn smiled, genuine and unguarded. "That I'm grateful. For Isla, for the 22 years I had with her. For you, for however long we have together. For all of it. Even the pain?" "Even the pain," he confirmed. "Because it means I loved deeply enough to hurt when I lost them. That's not a curse, Sally. That's the most human thing about me, the ability to love knowing it might end, but loving anyway." The sun climbed higher, washing them both in light. December 25th would always carry grief, but it also carried Isla's memory, Sally's love, and the reminder that even immortals could learn to live again. The music box's melody drifted from inside, and Finn realized he was humming along, not to drown out pain anymore, but to celebrate what had been and what still was. 600 years of darkness, broken by one persistent woman with a music box and the courage to love a monster back into being a father. The loving was the point. He finally understood.